Sorry I left you in suspenders last night with a dog lying stretched out on the turf right in front of them. Something like that. I'm not actually sure where it cut out. Anyway, Barlam's ready to hear the rest. So, they've been chasing after this stag, haven't they? And they were galloping up a little valley between clumps of bramble and taller bushes. There was no sound of barking from Dinah, and then suddenly in the moonlight there was a dog lying stretched out on the turf right in front of them. The pony slowed and swerved, and the children fell off in a tangle of limbs onto the soft turf that smelt of wild thyme. And the pony trotted off casually to get its breath back. Of the stag, there was no sign. Barney and Lou sorted themselves out. Lou tried to stand up, but her legs felt woolly after using them to cling on for so long, so she sat down again. "Well, Dinah," she said to the dog, "where's the stag, eh? Couldn't catch it? I suppose. Never mind. You're not a staghound, are you? Hey, Dinah? Then she turned to Barney. "Barney, if we're not dreaming all this, where are we?" There was a line of beech trees at the top of the little valley, and Barney felt there must be something the other side of them. He scrambled up the slope, went between the dark trunks, and beyond them was nothing. It was like flying. Smooth turf sloped down steeply under his feet, and far below the land was spread out like a map. "Lou," he called, "look where we are." They realised they were standing on the edge of the North Downs, a place they knew well enough, and the moon made everything as clear as day, and yet the more they looked, the stranger it was. There should have been pylons striding over the land carrying electric cables. There should have been squares of orchard, hop gardens, villages and churches. There should have been cement works in the distance by the river. And where was the tall television mast with the red light on top? They could see nothing but forest and heath over the whole floor of the valley, and out of the night strange animal noises came up to them. And in all this stretch of empty land there were only three points of light twinkling to show that man was somewhere about. The nearest light was only a little way along the side of the hills, and now they could hear human voices coming from it. "It's a campfire," said Barney. "Come on, let's go and see." "But it might be savages or something," said Lou doubtfully. "There aren't any savages in England." "There aren't any stags in this part of England, but we just saw one, and this doesn't seem to be England at all." "Well, it must be somewhere," said Barney. "Let's go and ask those people." "I think we ought to be careful," said Lou. "Let's creep up through the woods and have a look first." They went back into the shadow of the beech woods and made their way as quietly as they could over last year's crackling leaves and husks. "Keep to heel, Dinah," whispered Lou. "Barney, I wish we had a lead. Dinah might give us away." "I've got some string in my pocket, I think," said Barney. He rummaged in his pockets and found a coil of hairy string he had taken from a runner bean that seemed to have finished with it. They tied it to Dinah's collar and went cautiously on. Soon the sounds of the camp were quite near, and they could see the red fire flickering through the black beech trunks. Sounds as if they're having a party," said Lou. "Listen, music." "That's not music," said Barney. "Well, it's jazz or something, or one of those skiffle groups." As they moved towards the firelight, keeping to the shadows, the noises were so loud that they did not have to worry about keeping them quiet themselves. They reached the last beech tree of the wood, a giant with thick roots coiling into the chalky soil and broad boughs spreading out towards the slope on which the camp stood. "What are you doing, Barney?" hissed Lou, as Barney started scrambling onto one of the spreading branches. "I'm going to climb this tree so I can see." "So am I then. What about Dinah?" "You can't bring her up." "I'll tie her up here," said Lou. "Lie down, Dinah. Be quiet. There's a good dog." They climbed from limb to limb of the beech tree. It was a huge, great beech tree, and they climbed until they got to a thick bough that grew out straight towards the firelight. Barney sat astride it and inched himself along until he reached a fork far out over the bushes and brambles that straggled along the edge of the wood. They had a perfect view of the camp. Or was it a camp? There were beehive huts made of poles planted in the ground, tied together at the top with thatch and straw and rushes. In an open space there was like quite a crowd of people gathered around the fire. None of them seemed to be wearing much more than Lou and Barney. All of them seemed to have a lot of wild black hair, except for a few grey and white heads. The older ones were sitting, lying or squatting around. Toddlers were tumbling or sleeping in the dust. Boys and girls were chasing each other round and outside of the crowd or teasing fierce-looking dogs. Look, there's a picture of the camp that they can see. Can you see it? Can you see there's like huts all the way around the edge of it? And there's a campfire in the middle. Ooh, doesn't seem normal for England, does it? The noise that was something like music came mostly from a group in the middle of the crowd. Oh, sorry, Barlam, I lost you. You were watching. I dropped home a bit and he couldn't see the pictures. The noise that was something like music came mostly from a group in the middle of the crowd near the fire. There were 4 figures in the group. One was holding half the jawbone of a large animal and running another longer bone up and down the teeth, making a scratchy rhythm. Another had a hollow log which he was hitting with 2 wooden clubs. The third was the singer. He didn't seem to have much idea of a tune and the children couldn't understand the words. But it was quite clear that what the song was about. One moment the singer was a deer grazing peacefully and then looking anxiously about. Then he was a hunter stalking his prey with spear poised. Then he was the deer fleeing, the hunter throwing his spear, the deer falling, the hunter carrying it back to camp. The crowd became as excited as the singer and joined in with hand claps and cries. But there was yet another sound which the listeners could not quite understand, a kind of blong, 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 bloom. Not always on one note, as most of the singing was, and not really taking much notice of the rhythm of the long drum and the jawbone. It was as if someone who had never heard a tune was trying to play one for the first time with a tea chest string and broomstick. Then the bone scraper, in his excitement, joined the singer in a little shuffle dance, and the children could see the 4th member of the band. On the ground was a large, hollow animal skull with great curving horns. Tied between the horns were 3 or 4 lengths of string or gut, and a small dark figure was squatting by this simple harp, plucking at the strings, blung, blung, balloon, blung, and taking very little notice of anyone else. In fact, the song came to an end. The drummer gave the final thump to his log. The bones scraper rattled to a stop, but the little harpist went on with his 3 notes as if he were the only musician in the world. Some of the crowd began to laugh and jeer at him as he played away, but it wasn't until someone threw a meat bone, catching him on the head with a clunk, the children could hear in their tree, that the player looked up as if surprised to see that he was not alone. Barney nearly fell off his branch. It's Stig!" he almost shouted. "Hush, Barney," Lou hissed. "You'll give us away." "But it is Stig," said Barney excitedly. "I said he was clever. He probably invented that thing he was playing music on. Where's he going now?" For the little figure Barney said was Stig was rather sulkily walking away from the campfire towards the trees. "He's coming this way," whispered Lou. "Barney, you're not to give us away." "Why not? He's my friend." "What about all the others? Who are they? You never said about them." I don't know who they are. I never saw them before. Well, we'd better be careful, Barney. All right. But what gave them away was Dinah, tied up at the bottom of the tree. She had been quiet up to now, but when she heard Stig walking towards the wood, she began to growl, and then to give short, sharp barks. On the edge of the bushes, Stig at once froze into stillness. Dinah went on barking, and some of the wild children playing on the outside of the crowd heard her too. The bolder ones ran to the edge of the wood. The little ones ran to their parents by the fire. Soon a number of alarmed elders, snatching up spears and clubs, were making for the woods, and the sound of Dinah's bark. Oh, they're coming. They might find the children. Oh no. Lou and Barney clung to their high branch like squirrels, not daring to move. They could see the strange people on the edge of the wood, wondering at the unusual sound of a spaniel's bark. Then at last, plucking up courage to advance into the darkness of the bushes and the beech forest, holding their weapons at the ready, Dinah's barking became more and more frantic as she heard the rustling of bodies through the bushes all round and the crackling and snapping of footsteps. Under cover of the noise, Barney whispered, "Lou, we've got to escape." "How can we?" breathed Lou. Look where that bough goes." Barney pointed in the moonlight. The limb they were on stuck out into nothingness, but one of its branches went across to another long limb, and this one stretched out and rubbed shoulders with another great beech tree. If they climbed over into the other tree, Barney thought they could escape. "We can go across there," he whispered. "Come on, while they're making all this noise." Lou's face seemed to go pale. "Oh, Barney, we can't, and they'll find Dinah anyhow." "I'm going to try, then perhaps we can rescue Dinah." He inched himself backwards along the limb they were sitting on until he reached the branch that grew crosswise. When he came to it, he wondered what to do. It was too thin to sit astride, so he decided to hang underneath it like a sloth by his hands and legs. Upside down like this, he crawled through the empty air between the two big limbs. By bending his head right back, he had an upside-down view of the floor of the forest patched with moonlight, and right beneath him was a wild hunter, the tip of his spear pointing skywards, but looking at the ground. Barney hung without moving until the man had passed on, then moved as quickly and as quietly as he could to where the branch passed over and the other great limb was there. Here he got himself right way up on the bough again. His heart was thumping and his legs felt quivery, but at least he was safer for a little while. But now he had to go outward to where the two trees shook hands high in the air. He worked his way forward. As he went, the boughs became thinner and swayed more. At last he was there and the trees met. Where the branches crossed, their movement in the wind had rubbed a great dry scar, and nothing he could do would stop a loud creak coming from this rubbing place every time he moved. "I must get over onto the other tree," he thought. As quickly as he dared, he turned round so as to go backward down the new branch. Sorry, let me just read that again. Hold on a minute. "I must get over onto the other tree," he thought. As quickly as he dared, he turned round so as to go backward down the new branch. Let go the branch he had just come up and... crack! It was a dead branch. Barney fell through nothing, then struck a flat leafy branch below, slid outwards from this onto a lower one, crashed through and fell the last few feet onto the soft forest floor. And that's the end of that chapter. I wonder what's going to happen to Barney. He's on the floor. Lou's up the tree, Dinah's tied to the bottom of the tree, Stig's there, and there's all these other people there, and they've got spears. I wonder what's going to happen. The next chapter is chapter 9. It's the last chapter, and it's called The Standing Stones. Look, there's some of the cave people with their spears in the forest. We'll have to find out what happens tomorrow. I'll read the rest. Well, I'll read at least half tomorrow. It might be the next day before we finish. Okay. See you again soon. It's exciting, isn't it?